evening. I'd like to welcome you to yet another edition of Talking with Colerain Township. I'm very fortunate to have with us here at a very pivotal time. It's spring, so we've got new things to talk about. As you can see, a full roundtable of discussion. Of course, with me, Jim Rowan, Township Administrator. Jim, glad you could join us.
Jason, thanks for having me.
And of course, on the other side, we brought the law. We're coming down on you hard today, but of course, I've got Dan Meloy, who is our Public Safety Director. Is that the correct terminology?
Works.
Is that going to work
works.
for you today?
It does.
And then, of course, Mark Denney, Chief Mark Denney. I still got to get used to it.
Me too.
But
I'm
it's
still working on it
I was
myself.
going to say, you're probably still working on it as well. So you obviously can see we've got a little bit of a discussion here because most people probably know what's coming up. But to kind of get things started, as we're talking here, Jim, of course, I've made mention that Dan's no longer chief. We've got Mark as chief of police, and we've discussed that at the beginning of the year. But this new position that Mr. Meloy is in now, where did that come about, and where are we with this?
Sure. Well, it came about probably about halfway through last year. I kind of talked conceptually with Dan Meloy and started working through the board about the importance of public safety. And as we continue to work to eliminate the silos within the township, and we've been promoting shared services for a number of years, and there was in fact a big article in the news this week about shared services, and with 93% of our money being spent in the area of public safety, it was important for us to move forward with the direction of having a public safety director kind of working both with our fire chief and our police chief, just to see what opportunities there are to continue to drive down cost, create greater efficiency. What kind of shared service opportunities do we have between the two departments? Purchasing power, training opportunities, cross-training, and just kind of looking at public safety in a whole different way. And I felt that having a position like Director of Public Safety would be able to help drive that home. Mm-hmm. And Dan has got the background of the police department. He understands public safety. If he can spend time every day with the employees of both departments and try to merge this culture into one, mm-hmm. We're not merging the departments. We're going to still operate as totally distinct, fire and police. They have their own funding mechanisms. But if we can create a culture of one where we can really understand how we can better serve our community, mm-hmm. That's our number one goal. And Dan can get into some details on what he's been doing since December to try to drive that cost down and create a greater opportunity.
As I say, December comes along, we hear that the scary word, Dan's retiring. It was the first thing I heard in a trustees meeting, and I'm like, boy, I got to get his job because I want to retire as early as... But then, of course, comes this position. And obviously, the choice was simple for you to go along with this, I'm assuming.
It was because Colerain is where I grew up, Colerain is where I live, Colerain is where I served my adult life. So to be able to stay a part of the organization and then work with the police and fire departments, it was new. It's definitely a challenge. I like challenges. It allowed me to get in and look at things with a different perspective and say, you know what, let's try. And that's basically the culture that we've been working under for the previous 6.5 years within the police department, and then since for the past 2.5 years within the township was, you know what, we don't know that we're going to fail until we fail. It's okay to take chances and see what will work, because just because we've always done it isn't necessarily the answer, especially in today's world. You have to look at things just a little bit differently, or sometimes a lot differently. So the big piece for me was stepping into this role was getting to know what was going on within our fire service and learning that these guys and gals that are out there on the trucks, in the fire stations, what makes them tick, what makes them successful, why is this fire department the respected organization that they are regionally, and then what can we do to make it better. So I'm still in the process of, and have been since December 23rd, the first day in, was engaging our firefighters, the officers, the captains, the battalion chiefs, and so on, is find out what we do well, what we need to do better, what we do to improve, and how we're going to get the road to get there. And I've probably met with over 40 of the staff. I had another opportunity to speak with another 20 plus. So, over 60 folks have given me feedback to this date and helped me see a picture of what this organization really is when it comes to the day-to-day operations and why we all thought they were good. It really helps you find out the real groundwork, the quality of the service that our community gets when they have emergency response, life safety, fire safety, and the amount of respect from peer agencies to our folks is really something. It makes you feel good that you live here. It makes you feel good that you work here, that these men and women are providing that service. But again, help me understand so we can drill these things down. One example is you saw an article, in yesterday's paper talking about shared services, was looking at the organization. There's an operational side, which is the fire service and the medic service. Then there's an administrative side that really focuses on the training, that has an academy that people look to come and learn how to be firefighters. There is fire inspections that handle 1,200 life and safety inspections every year throughout the township. That side of the organization had lost about 10,000 hours of service through part-time, full-time assignments, for a variety of different reasons, for death of firefighters to reassignments and things of that nature. How do we continue to provide this service that is obviously important, but do it differently? So we looked at what we currently provide. We have full-time police officers in the mall. We have full-time police officers in the schools. Schools are paramount in the safety inspection area, the mall, with its development and that need for that understanding. Let's look at what are we already there with? We're already there with full-time police officers. Can we reduce the workload on that captain assigned to fire inspections while allowing him the oversight, but then giving him a resource to say, I don't necessarily have to be doing the several hundred inspections that go along with Northgate. The schools and daycares have to be inspected twice a year. We have 13 different schools in the township, allows them to, and it requires accountability at that local level. So the one inspection, okay, we passed, well, he'll be back next year. Well, the police officers are in there every day, so there has to be safety, accountability on an everyday basis. Our officers are going to learn. We have one officer from the mall currently in a class. He's just getting ready to finish up. Our police officers in the schools will get a class and training later. That's one piece. The other piece is to train our police officers, any new police officer, and then there are police officers in the mall, and then that work inside the schools in emergency medical training. And again, not to take any work away from the fire service.
Right.
The responsibility is changed, and let's just take, for example, an active shooter situation. Previously, 15 years ago, you waited for a SWAT team. 10 years ago, you waited for 3 or 4 more officers to arrive. The response in law enforcement today is single officer response. So if our officers are inside the school in the mall, which they are, and something like that happens, they're not going to wait for anything. They're going to respond, address the issue as quickly as they possibly can. If they can gain a resolution and they win, there's a good chance there's going to be people there that may be injured. If someone's shooting, there's a good chance there's... Now what's your responsibility? To stand there and wait? To stand there and look at the victims and acknowledge that they're injured, but I don't have enough training to be able to provide anything more than a pressure bandage? So from that extreme, we can do that, but then from the simple everyday response, police officers are out there 24 hours a day. They're out there patrolling 46 square mile territory. We have 5 fire stations. There's a darn good chance that our police officers are going to maybe close to an incident when that fire. We already respond to those fire calls anyway.
Correct.
If we're close, rather than arriving and saying, "Well, do you hear the sirens? They're coming. They're coming, sir. They're coming, ma'am." I now have a skill that I can provide basic life safety response, speed up the response and the turnaround times for our firefighters and our paramedics, so then they can be available for that next run. The average time for our firefighter medics leaving the station and getting back in service is 58 minutes. If I can reduce 5, 4, 3, 2, 10 minutes and getting those experts back in service because our police officer was able to ask the right questions, acknowledge it, get the basic vitals and going, get the information that's necessary, I've saved time for that next emergency, which might be that life. It's a win. And plus, it's just the right thing to do. When we're talking about joining partnerships and sharing services, there's men and women that are out there. Why not utilize them to the best of our abilities to make sure that we're giving the community the best bang for their dollar, and then providing that aid. We save lives with CPR. We save lives with the AED. Why couldn't we save lives knowing how to use some of the other tools that go along with emergency response? And then hopefully, again, partnering with our firefighters and then speeding up that process. So those are two really significant initiatives.
Wouldn't you say then, in a way, that you're somewhat changing the culture of police and fire in Colerain and making it a unique entity?
You're exactly right. And Mr. Rowan said in the beginning, break down the silos. Don't look within your own organization. Look at each other. And we've used the term, we work in a community policing model with a problem-solving emphasis, a problem-solving philosophy. We have expanded that under the administration of community service from a government perspective. So we're not looking at that's zoning, that's fire, that's police, that's roads. What do we need to do? What can we provide through all of our expertise to address issue A, issue B? Is it everyday service? Is it special circumstances? What are the issues? But we are looking at things from a global perspective within the township. Let's make sure we're addressing our community first and foremost. I really don't care what other communities do, because ultimately we're responsible to the 60,000 residents and all the businesses in our community to give them value while taking care of our firefighters and our police officers and our zoning guys. We want to make sure, because ultimately, from an EMT perspective, you may be required to save your life, because you may be put in that harm's way. You might have to take care of your own, and it's nice to know that I have some skills that otherwise wouldn't have. Maybe the person I'm trying to save is me. So selfishly, it responds to a whole lot of different areas.
It does sound selfish, but at the same time, I think you're right. You have a duty to take care of the constituents in which you were brought in to take care of.
Absolutely. They expect that from us. And to stand with someone and say, I don't know, or I wish I could help, that feels pretty hopeless. And when you look at some of the things that have gone on in history across, to feel like that is a lasting issue with you well past the time that you end your service date is, why couldn't I do more? I wish I could have done more. So we're providing our folks the opportunity to give the best and the most service they possibly can, no matter what the circumstances. Your firefighter and the medics are going to be the experts. The police officers and those guys are going to be the experts in that area, but we're going to follow the guidelines that our firefighters and because they're going to be the ones that teach us.
Sure.
They're going to be the ones that set the criteria, and from inspections as well, that say, this is the standard that you have to live up to. We're going to hold you accountable, and this is what we want. So they know and have a confidence in our police officers that they're doing what they're supposed to do. So it helps immensely.
And listening to what we've have said in past conversations about the idea of the best-in-class community, this is absolutely proving your point to that, is that you've gotten someone in who's looking at it as a growth potential and a life-saving measure to make a best-in-show community.
Absolutely. It's all about providing the highest level of service that we can at the lowest possible cost.
And of course, with your promotion, and I have to call it a promotion, it's obviously a wonderful promotion, left a vacancy in your department, your former department, which we gained a wonderful new chief as well. And so, Mark, how did that feel going into such large shoes? Because let's face it, they're pretty large shoes to fill.
I've said the exact same word many times, and I think what gives me the confidence to do well in this job is the fact that Dan's still here. And the communication we have is tremendous. I mean, it's a daily event where I'm either walking to his office or he's calling me, and any questions I have, I think I've been mentored by Dan for many years, and our egos do not keep us from asking questions that need to be asked. I don't pretend to know all the answers. Dan did a fantastic job. I mean, anybody that's seen him work knows the quality of work he does, and just to be able to have him as a mentor still is what's going to help me succeed, I'm sure.
And again, you've already been in this position for 4 months as well. Trials, tribulations, I mean, obviously you're still, unfortunately, getting your feet wet on this.
He worked a lot harder than I thought he did. I sat next to his office for 6 years and didn't realize that he was as busy as he was, but I think that's a credit to him that he made it look effortless.
Sure.
it is a big change for me, and it's a global view now. I'm seeing things in a bigger picture. I'm responsible for a lot more than I was before. I'm responsible for this community and the safety of the community, so I take it very seriously. And I think what's exciting is we speak with one mind. And when we brought these changes to our police officers, normally changes creates fear. What was neat was it was excitement. Can I be the first one to have that training? Can I be the first one to be a fire inspector? So it's actually exciting to see these guys waiting to take part in this.
And that's
in this new
interesting.
vision.
And that's interesting that you say it that way because, again, you say most of the time most people look at it as fear, or a fear of losing their job, or now we're going to have to do this. And
Well, if you've grown up in this department, change happens a lot.
sure,
We continually push forward. We don't allow ourselves to settle for what everybody else considers okay. We're looking for that new opportunity, that new innovation, and the new way to save money and deliver better service. So that's been kind of a culture in our police department for years anyway. So it's not been a hard transition.
So for them to have that spark of excitement or that wonder and awe of what might happen, it doesn't sound like it's a new thing at all.
It's not new, but it makes you feel good every time you see it.
Oh, absolutely. I can imagine that. Of course, within that, for as long as Mr. Meloy has been in, and then of course as long as you have been in, we've been working under auspices of many things. And of course, what I'm leading up to is obviously what's coming up in May. And we have a very important ballot issue on the ballot. And having you both here to explain the importance of it, having Mr. Rowan here as well, we're looking at something that's gone on past its lifespan, really. And to be able to hear two people who are talking about the excitement and the thrill of what's going on to protect the community, how important this can be. You know, I don't know who wants to speak about it first, but I mean, I know each of you would like to make their point about what exactly we're dealing with here.
I think you touched upon it. This levy has gone 2 years past what was expected, what was promised to this community. We've gone 7 years now on a 5-year levy. Through some of the things we talked about, the innovation and the new way of thinking, we've been able to stretch this levy 2 extra years. We've taken it about as far as we can take it to be able to still offer our services that the community values and told us that they want. We've had several things happen since 2007. The state removed the tangible personal property tax, which removed about $230,000 from the police budget. Communication center costs have gone up $4 since 2007 to $18.30 per call. And we're an agency that responds to 40,000 calls for service. So you can see where that would have an impact. The Sheriff's Department, you know, I'll talk about it now. We suffered the removal of 15 deputies since 2012. Their service was taken from our community by the Sheriff's Department, and we have to respond to that.
Sure.
We have to still provide service to this community, and we had to come up with a way of doing that. Do you have any?
Well, yeah, I mean, that was probably one of the first things I dealt with when I walked
When
in
you
the
walked
door
Yeah.
in 2012 is, you know, either pay us more money or we're pulling 13 deputies. Well, I had already looked at the financial forecast. I knew that we were not in a position to shell more money out. We were trying to stretch the levy. Our commitment and my commitment when the board hired me is we're not going to ask for more money until we have identified every opportunity through innovation, driving additional revenue, alternative revenue, and make sure that our operations were in a direction that we felt comfortable with before we asked for more money. So to have to be facing a decision of losing 13 deputies and recognizing the impact that was going to have on our community, we still had to provide that service. And luckily for us, and fortunately for Colerain, is we had a lot of innovation. We talked about the Reserve Officer Program, and while we were behind the 8 ball, we were able to pull that thing off. We got officers on the street so that we did not lose the service element to our public, but they did that at no cost. That is an unsustainable model. In order for us to move forward, we have to be able to fund those officers to replace those deputies that previously were paid for by the county. And so it required us to make some decisions. We were still able to stretch that levy out 2 additional years. And now we're to the point that to continue to offer the types of things that our community values or have told us that they value, that's what's driving the need for the 1.95 mil levy. And we're doing a lot of good things, and we don't want to take a step backwards.
I think it's important that we understand, and, you know, having been here for 25 years, you know, the 2002 levy was a huge change in the game. It was the fork in the road. It was, You know, prior to 2002, with our manpower and the responsibilities that go along with policing in Colerain, some say the second busiest community outside the city of Cincinnati as it relates to police and fire service, was changing from a traditional reactive law enforcement agency to a proactive, problem-solving community policing philosophy was all part of that 2002 levy. That was the mission and the vision we set forth with asking our residents in 02 is, this is what we want to do, this is the change, this is what we need for this to happen, and it was voted 58-42. And that initiated the problem solving, really drove home the community policing with our school resource officers and our bike unit, and adding additional people to our road patrol staffing. And then 2007 was really just a asking of the community of, okay, this is what we did in 2002. We just want to keep doing what you said you believed in, which was being proactive, looking at things that are happening in a neighborhood and not just saying, well, you know, here we are today, just call us back tomorrow, but looking at it and saying, why are these things occurring? Why are these thefts from vehicles occurring? Why are these burglaries occurring? Why are these A, B, or C happening? And then trying to problem solve ahead of it to figure out what was the true purpose of that issue, and then get rid of that so we could eliminate the total problem. 07, it was just to maintain consistent service. It was to maintain the staffing level. It was to maintain everything based on a 5-year model, what the costs were at that particular time, and that passed again, 58-42.
And do you feel that it, I don't want to call it, say, plateaued, but it reached that pinnacle to be able to be at that level, to be able to say, we can give you what you've asked for, but I'm kind of in a constraint?
Well, what the mission was, because very, very simply, the direction of the board was in 2007, when they hired me, was be smart with your dollar.
Okay.
We believe in the philosophy, work the philosophy, but be smart with that dollar. Taking that into consideration, how can we provide the best service at that dollar for this community to continue to drive home what they voted for, which was policing philosophy, proactive, things of that nature. That's when we started partnering additionally with the schools, and then you saw things like the Driving Angels and the CARE Initiative and the Family Justice Center, all driven on how we can provide that greater service at as minimal a cost as we possibly can, but then make that dollar stretch. And that's been the key and part of this whole thing, is whether it's been the contract with Northgate Mall, or additional service contracts with Northwest Local Schools, or creation of an impound lot to generate additional revenue. It was to drive that and giving us the ability to provide the best service based on the needs of our community. And that's where we are kind of today, with saying, this is what we bring to the table. Do you trust us and what we've done in the past to say, okay, we're comfortable with that?
And I think as you look at the township as a whole, some of the steps that we've taken through our shared service model between our police department and our zoning department, trying to address the blight and the crime together, working together, addressing the John Rowe situation. We've been dealing with crime down there for over 2 decades, and we are very close. Within the next couple of weeks, we should see some closure on that project. And that's really exciting. And to be able to tackle those problems that we know, if we don't address, are going to continue to drain our resources into the future. If we can tackle that one piece at a time, and we're not going to stop at John Rowe's.
No.
There's going to be other opportunities out there that we're going to tackle. But the innovation, the creativity to reach out to Northgate Mall and to reach out to the various partnerships, what people need to understand is that we have a duty to serve. If we don't have that contract generating revenue, we're still going to serve.
Sure.
But it's going to be at the cost of the taxpayers rather than the mall in that particular case. So I applaud these gentlemen for being able to create that additional revenue source, because we know we have to serve. Let's create the alternative revenue to try to keep our taxes as low as possible.
Jim kind of spoke on it, the partnerships.
Yes.
You know, we realized a long time ago that this is too big of a job to do on your own. We reached out to our federal partners, the FBI, the DEA, and the Marshal Service. And by force multiplying, by joining those teams, we have all their resources available to us at the drop of a phone call.
And I'll say drop names, FBI and all that, it sounds like something that would be very difficult to do, but it sounds almost effortless in the way in which you've done it.
It is. I mean, they approached us. I'd like to say our reputation kind of preceded us, and they knew we were a quality organization, and they asked us to join and to partner with them. And it's been a fantastic partnership. They've offered us services of their evidence response team. They've offered to come down during active shooter situations and assist us in any way we need. And these are resources that we couldn't have on our own.
Mm-hmm.
We just wouldn't be able to function without that. And it takes a little bit of give. You can't just take. So we do have officers that are assigned to there, but they bring back so much more value to this community than what we'd have without them.
And I guess you could look at the extra 2 years that we had on the previous levy. It kind of spurred a lot more of that creativity. We're hoping that continues forward, and I think that's really what the added boost to what the levy would have.
Let me answer that.
Okay.
Absolutely. That goes along with the appropriate selection of quality leaders, of like mind, and understand the long-term vision of the organization. What does the board want? What does Mr. Rowan want? What is expected of me now? Mm-hmm. And he said it earlier. There's a very good relationship. So when we start talking about what expectations are, these guys know going in that we accept nothing. The fact is we receive what we get, we appreciate it, we respect it, but we continue to drive that forward as long as we can, as far as we can, because that's the expectation. The expectation is this will provide you with the basics, but the reality is it's up to you with your challenges and your people to make this provide the best service that we possibly can. The idea, and the chief said it earlier, is we have to continue to operate in a model that continues to push us forward. If we start pushing forward, we start settling, and then we start regressing, mm-hmm. and that's just unacceptable. But that's the expectation set from above.
Sure.
So it falls down. But again, the benefit of someone from within taking on that leadership, he already understood that. Right. He's already been a part of the drive forward. Now he's just responsible to manage it from the police department's perspective. But that has a big thing to do with selecting the right leader and making the right person responsible for the direction, and that's where his benefit is huge.
I think as leaders we like to take credit for all these great ideas that we have, but it's a cultural thing. It's an organizational thing. Many of our most successful programs actually came from our police officers. Mm-hmm. There's a culture that you can come up into my office and say, I've got a great idea, and we're going to try it. Our CARE program, our Driving Angels program, all those generated from police officers. Mm-hmm. It wasn't leadership that came up with the idea. It was leadership that said, let's move forward and take the chance. And
these are things we need,
exactly.
But it was somebody else's
mm-hmm.
initiative or ingenuity or
right.
spark of imagination to do
Please
so.
come forward with ideas. We will try anything. I've got several things that we're working on now that I think are going to be very beneficial to the community once we get them launched, and it came from officers again. So I'd like to take the credit for all these things, as I'm sure Dan would too, but we couldn't do it without the people that make up this organization.
And to be able to take that philosophy and that culture, and now with Dan's position, move that into the fire ranks. Our fire ranks have got the most number of part-time employees within any part of this township. If you were to walk into a fire station, I would challenge you to be able to differentiate between a full-time and a part-time, because that's the level of professionalism they bring to the table. But to now be able to have somebody overseeing public safety, recognizing that's 93% of our budget, and driving that culture, and to reach out and engage in those 60 people, and we're going to continue.
Sure.
Because we want to know what's on your mind. What do you think that we can do to make the department better, work smarter, and stretch the resources? Our fire levy, passed in 2010, is supposed to come up in 15. We've already stretched that to 18. Our challenge is we're going to stretch these levies as far as we can. We cannot continue the 5-year levy cycles. Our communities are getting out-taxed, but unfortunately as a government, that's our only choice.
Right.
It's either service or additional revenue. We'll do everything we can to generate and create alternative revenue, but at some point in time, you have to return to the public to see what they value in the service you provide. We hope when they go in there on May 6th and they make that decision that they value the programs we're offering. Our commitment is we're going to continue to look at those alternative revenue sources. We're going to continue to look at the way we do business. Mm-hmm. We're going to continue to build a culture of one township working for the citizens of this community.
I like what you said about the idea of the levy. We know it's a 5-year levy, but you're already looking out to stretch it as much as you can on this already. Mm-hmm. That probably puts a challenge on you, but at the same time, as we've already been talking about, it's a challenge you're willing to accept.
Absolutely. The fire department's already accepted that challenge. The police department's already in that same mindset. So we're not.
They've already been in that mode for a while.
They've already been in that mode to make sure that, whether it's washing a raincoat rather than replacing it, sewing up a hole in a jacket rather than buying it, we've been working on that model for 25 years because we knew we were held accountable. And that is the best. People criticize the levies. Why do we have levies? But the reality is it holds us accountable to make sure that can answer
That's
to
fair.
you. We can answer the questions in front of any, what are you doing? How are you managing the dollar? Are you being smart? Because it's a big deal to take additional funds out of someone's pocket. You need to have the answers. You need to be able to you're held accountable.
Right.
This is
I
our
was just going to say, it's the accountability factor.
Absolutely. This is our accountable time, and we have no problem answering those questions or opening up the books, per se, as they use in some cultures, to say, this is how we take care of our dollar and this is how we're smart. And the fire department has shown that history, and the police department has been working hard to do that too.
The police department's been raised, basically, with an understanding that you will respect the dollar we have. It's not yours to just use because it's part of a tax levy, but you will respect it and use it responsibly. We do things like leave the lights off in the hallway.
Yeah.
We have timers on the lights throughout the building. I mean, everything we can do to drive down cost, we look at each other and say, well, I wouldn't do that with my own budget. Why would I do it with the township's budget?
Right.
So there's a responsibility and an accountability for that money that I think is going to help us drive it way past what the minimum is on these levies.
And I think it's also important to recognize our employees. I mean, they have stepped up.
Absolutely.
They've taken 4 years of pay freezes. We're paying higher amounts toward our health insurance than probably any other government around. Those things help contribute to the bottom line and help us to be able to stretch those dollars. So, we talk a lot about some of what the leadership's doing, the innovation, what our employees are doing, but we also can't forget that they took a lot of personal sacrifice. They recognize the bigger cause here, and I applaud them for stepping up through the bargaining process.
Well, I think, and he is exactly right, and just because we didn't talk about it yet doesn't mean we're not considerate of that, because
Or hasn't been thought of.
Absolutely, because two other pieces that are important on that same thought process is the police department went so far and eliminated the steps from the bargaining unit contract, which was it's a big piece. I mean, that's a huge piece as part of public employment, public safety employment across the nation, that when you get hired, there's a guaranteed step increase for a period of so many years that you're always going to get that raise, as well as the fact that they allowed for a fixed entry-level salary cost that allowed us to work from, and now you utilize what is the right decision for the employees, for the township at the time you're there. So when the next contract gets negotiated, what's the best interest of Colerain? What's in the best interest of the police officers? What is it right now? Hopefully everything's going to be great and you can negotiate that fair wage, but they've given us an ability to control that dollar and make sure we're taking care of it and not building in costs that we can't have any control over, no matter what the economy does over the next several years. So those men and women of the police department that said, we're stepping up, they demonstrate that they're a part of the larger solution. They're not being selfish. They're just saying, how can we make it work? Because the world is different than it was previously. We want to be a part of the success and not part of the downfall. So.
And we took that model and we applied that. Our Public Works Department, through their collective bargaining contracts, same way. They have a new one-level entry system for all new employees coming in. And that's how you control future cost.
Sure.
Because we have to make decisions every day when we have a resignation or a retirement. How are we going to fill that position? If we have a future cost figure that we know is going to get escalated, it's going to decide how we choose to fill that position or whether we choose that position. If we're able to fix some of those future costs, then it allows us to continue to adequately staff in a fair way to everybody. And those conversations are going on right now with our fire union. They seem to be very receptive, and Dan's been working through that process to, provide opportunities for firefighter advancement. We recognize that there needs to be some changes in the leadership structure, even within the firehouses. And, we're confident. We're working very close with all of our unions. And I got to say, I'm proud of our team. I think everybody's coming together, and we're all trying to do the right thing.
You brought up earlier, and I want to keep on the idea of staff, the idea that prove to me or show to me who's part-time, who's full-time. That's not easy. Mm-hmm. In a day and age where people feel entitled for one thing, and they have that stigma, well, I'm part-time, I'm full-time. How do you get around that? Because by all means, that is probably one of the hardest icebreakers to crack completely, but to be able to make it one team.
I'll speak for the police department, the reserve program that we instituted.
That's exactly where I was going.
That was a concern. And how do you bring people in, ask them to work as long as they work and as hard as they work, but treat them differently? So the mandate was we find people who are equally trained that meet our standard, that if we had the ability, we would hire full-time and bring them in. And I think our officers looked and saw that these guys are making it possible for us to stretch this dollar a little bit further. They're not just here taking up space, they're actually making it possible for us to succeed and move forward and be able to maintain.
And in that same regards, I know you've talked at many different meetings and the like about the reserve program, that it's almost a true incentive program to make it to that next level.
Right, and we give them the opportunity, you know, when there is a time to move somebody into a full-time rank, that decision doesn't get made by leadership. If I didn't think they weren't great, I wouldn't have hired them in the first place.
Exactly.
So we ask the officers that they work with, who has proven themselves to you as being valuable and ready to move forward? And usually it's a unanimous decision. It's pretty common that there's one person that stands out, and there's an incentive then with those reserve officers to be that one person, you know, to work the extra hours, to work hard, to give to the department. And there wasn't one person in that group that I wouldn't have taken and put in a full-time position immediately. They've been fantastic.
I think the nice thing about that philosophy is you treat everybody with respect, you set the same expectation for everybody. My group emails that go out to everybody go out to part-timers as well as full-timers. If I'm going to have a litter walk like we did this week, it's going out to everybody because we want to embrace them as part of Colerain's family. And as Chief Denney just mentioned, you know, there's nothing better in the world when you need to hire a new full-time person to know the pool of candidates that you're going to be pulling from is somebody that you've been working with over a period of time. You know them, you know their work ethic, you know their contributions that they make. If you don't have a feeder program like in our part-time department in the fireside or a reserve department, then you're taking a chance in a posting, and you know somebody can come in and shine on an interview, but you really don't know how well they're going to do.
They may look good on paper.
That's right. So our reserve program and our part-timers commit, and they demonstrate their ability to serve, and then we have this built-in internal pool to pull from. And I think that's one of the things that makes us different in how we can provide such a quality service with quality employees.
And I think Chief Denney made the analogy as well, is that they already know the way.
Yeah.
You've already trained them to the specifications, and the idea that this is how Colerain is.
Right.
You take it,
There's a different expectation with Colerain police officers and many other departments. You will deliver extra service to this community. It's not just going out and being a reactive police officer. It's being proactive, being a problem solver, and being part of the community. So they have that expectation built in, and they understand that when it's time to be full-time.
I think one of the other pieces that's important to this, we learned as we went through the reserve program was in order to hire a employee, it takes time. That process from the time that the decision is made by the board to move forward, to the posting, to the final day when you come back and say we found a candidate is generally anywhere between 4 and 6 months. By initiating the Reserve Corps, having the feeder program in place, someone like myself decides to retire. The chief then looks at the group and says, who's worthy? Then you go from being Dan Meloy, reserve guy, to the chief saying, Dan, would you like a full-time job? Get the board approval. Dan goes from Monday being reserve guy, volunteer, to Tuesday being full-time employee. Nothing changes except the fact that this guy retired, this guy starts the next day to replace him, and it's seamless. So we're not paying overtime to fill that void during the selection process. We're not struggling to find quality people because, boy, we really need them because summer's coming up and vacate. All those things that go into the decisions we made a long, long time ago, and this person has really identified their ability to do the job. It's just a matter of which one's best right now to take on that, and there's no reduction of service. We're not doing anything to increase costs. We're just doing, wow, that's fantastic, giving these people value for their time, and they see that, and they tell their friends, and next thing you know, you're getting another pool of candidates to take the chance to become a reserve officer. Why do you want to work for free for Colerain? Because there's opportunity, and if you're good, the good will be, the cream rises to the top.
Oh, absolutely.
Because we're reaching a stage. It was a long time where no one ever retired from the police department.
Well, there must be a true reason, because one, they either love where they work, or they work for what they love to do.
There was a long period of time, and just over the last 2 or 3 years did we reach a time where we're getting people that have identified Colerain Township as a career organization, not a stepping stone, and we're going to start losing those good people that spent their whole career here. And to have a feeder system already in place ensures that the chief can continue to provide the level of service that's important to our community as well as important to this police department to make sure we're doing the best we possibly can. That's a really true value that you really can't quantify until you have to experience what if they're not there.
And I think it really showed itself to me. We had guys turning down full-time jobs with other agencies. We had 2 guys actually quit full-time jobs with other police agencies to commit their time to this township because they wanted to be that next person. And luckily it
that
worked
says
out
a
for them.
lot. It truly does.
It shocked us.
It's scary.
It is.
It's scary because you're afraid of what they're giving you, and will you give enough back to them to
Right.
give them work? Those are scary decisions, but they made them.
Well, as we've said in most of this discussion, there was a risk. Not only in the risk from them because they're taking a full-time position to come here, but it's a risk on your end as well.
There were some in the community that challenged this idea. They thought they were going to get inferior service. And just as Mr. Rowan said before, I'll challenge you to come in and tell me who's a full-time officer and who's a reserve officer. The quality is 100%. There's not an officer in that, I would not put an officer in this community that didn't have the skills and the training to deliver perfect service to this community.
And we've obviously been talking about a lot of the positive things that have been going on in the police department and the informative pieces that are needed to be made for the May election. Now, of course, there is always a flip side to this, is that these are great and wonderful things. Mm-hmm. And I hate to be the rain cloud, but I know you've all been thinking about it. If something were to happen that on, Wednesday after, and you've read the decisions, what's the decision that happens if this goes south?
We get our marching orders from the board, who gets the marching orders from the community. If that's what the community decides, that they want the service level to step down, then we will have to respond to that. We will lay 9 police officers off. I'll reduce 2 sergeants back to patrol. And we'll have to eliminate many of the services that we offer right now because our prime responsibility is going to be police service in responding to calls for service. So we'll fall back more into a reactive mode. And it's a shame, but that's what we will have to do because that's what the community tells us they value in our police department.
And I have to ask, just as a personal note, how do you feel about going to that? Because you're not used to the reactive measure. You're used to active to the proactive.
I tell you, it'll wear us out because we'll still push. We will still push hard to give as much service as we can to this community because we care. There's something about the leadership in our department. I'm a Colerain boy. Dan is too. We care about this community. This isn't just someplace we come and then we go home and forget about. We live this community. And we will wear ourselves out delivering service regardless of what happens.
And I think Mark makes a good point. I know there's a misperception out there that we're using fire department funds to fund the police department under this new public safety model. That's not true. That's against the law.
Absolutely,
We go under an audit every 2 years. In fact, they're getting ready to come in and audit us here in the next couple of months. Those funds are restricted and they can only be used for fire and EMS purposes, which is why we've put the language in this police levy. There's a medic clause in there that will allow us to use these new levy funds to train police officers as medics. We cannot use fire funds to train police officers as medics. They're 2 totally distinctive pots of money.
And I think that's important for people to understand. I think in one value, people may not understand the idea of the separate funds, but at the same time, being able to specify exactly in this levy that's where it's going and that's what it's doing.
Well, and I think the other thing is, people said, well, what's the cost of this levy associated with the medic? There's really not an amount that we would affiliate with training our police officers and medic. It's a standard in which we want to implement. We have a wonderful internal training system that helps us to keep our training costs lower. We just think it's a value add. We've seen the response data within our fire department. We know as the population increases, the challenges we face in this community, response times are getting longer. If there's something that we can do through this shared service model as public safety servants and be able to train our police officers as medics to be able to help drive down or sustain that response time, that's a value service back to our community. But as Mark indicated, at the end of the day, on May 6th, our community will decide the value they see in our police department. And if we move forward, we'll continue to do what we're doing. We're going to add 3 police officers in 15, 3 in 16 as a result of the lost services we receive from the Sheriff's Department. We're going to continue to be innovative and creative in every way possible. And while most of the time these levies last for 5 years, I can tell you the 3 of us as well as our Board of Trustees, are committed to stretching these dollars as long as we possibly can.
I know we're running a little bit short of time. We're kidding, part one and a part two on this, and we obviously could. And we're just getting the basic information to you so that you can understand, so you have a better understanding when you have to go to the ballot on May 6th. What's that one last piece that you'd like to let people know that, here's the facts. This is what we need to look for when you're going to make your decision.
I think one thing we have to remember is Colerain Township is a good place to live. Look at what we're doing right now. Look at the things that are being done all across the township. The men and women that drive those cars, that wear those uniforms, whether it be police or fire, whatever the case may be, and Mark said it, they care. And that might sound a little bit hokey, but the reality is you don't see that everywhere. And you got to understand there's a commitment from this organization, police, fire, whatever the case may be, to serve this community to its fullest. And I think that's the takeaway, is that these guys aren't just doing a job. They have bought into a profession with a commitment and a vision that has been set for them, and they're on board with it, and they want to see it only get better. The organization that I left was good. I don't know that I would stack it against anyone, but that's a little bit biased, just as anyone would be. But I know that it's going to be better. I know it's going to be better than what I left it, because of the quality of the people that have been hired and the quality of the leadership that's in that organization. It's going to be better than what it is today, 5 years, 7 years down the road. So we've given them good reason to trust us. They've given good reason. We've given them every value for their dollar, no matter what levy it's been. We've continued to demonstrate smart decision-making, fiscal responsibility, while listening to them to provide the best service we possibly can. I just ask to continue that.
I agree with what Dan said. I think if you look at 2007, we keep our promises, we kept our promises, and we will continue to do so. Every decision we make is made with what we've promised this community in mind and what's best for this community. We will continue to deliver outstanding service regardless of what happens on May 6th, but I hope that the community sees the value in what we offer them.
And I would echo the same comments. I mean, we're committed to driving down our cost, creating the greatest amount of value for our community. Our vision statement is delivering excellence to a best-in-class community. We come to work every day trying to figure out how to do that. This is just one piece of the puzzle. And hopefully we'll move forward May 6th and continue to fight the next battle.
However the outcome is, we will be back to discuss one way or another. And of course, we did want to bring a little bit, not only are we finding cost-cutting services and measures throughout just the police and fire area, but other things are going on as well in the township that you may want to touch on before we leave. Is there anything that you'd
Sure.
like to...
I mean, I think if you drive up and down Colerain Avenue, you're seeing a rebirth of our economic development corridor. Mr. Birkenhauer meets daily with a number of developers, and what I'd love to be able to sit here today and tell you what's coming and what's not coming. We're working hard.
Which is a long list, and that's true.
We're working very hard, and our strategic initiatives that were adopted last year, John Rose Avenue continues to be at the top of that list. We are so close to finalizing this project and seeing a crime-blighted area finally come to a halt. And we're already looking at how we're going to address public infrastructure needs, whether it be road improvements, street improvements. We're talking about tree programs. We're going to have an in-house retreat here in the next month or so and lay out the whole level of initiatives that we're going to look at this next year. This police levy is our #1 concern right now. Kind of everything pivots on what happens there.
Sure.
But just, regardless of what happens on May 6th, we're already thinking of what's going to happen next. But we got a great team, and we're working hard for the residents of this township, and excited to continue that.
I think we see that every time you bring somebody onto the table. So I want to, again, we're running low on time, but I do want to make sure that everybody got their chance. But Dan, Mark, thanks for coming, as always.
Well, thank you for having us.
We look forward to having you back to discuss certain things. And
Absolutely.
Please.
Always.
You know that the seat's available for you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And Jim,
Thank
as
you.
always, thanks for joining us. Again, this is all informative, and that's what we're here for, to give you the information that affects you, the Colerain resident. I'm Jason Grzegorek, Waycross Community Media's Government Access Coordinator, giving you that opportunity to talk with Colerain Township. Have a great evening, and we'll see you next time.